All right, let's start by taking a look at this acoustic guitar. So the acoustic guitar has been recorded with two microphones. One's been labeled M, the other one's been labeled S. That means that the recording of the acoustic was done with a mid-side capture. Mid-side capture, briefly, is a single microphone in cardioid pattern or bidirectional pointed at the source, and then another microphone that is bidirectional, like a C414 set in bidirectional mode, or a ribbon microphone, 90 degrees off axis from the source, and that records mid-side. Basically what happens is the information coming in here and coming in here, once phase related, become the room capture, or become our stereo pickup. So here's the mid capture by itself. Sounds pretty good. Here's the side capture. Sounds like a room. Here they are together. So it sounds kind of thin and weird, and that's because we have not decoded the capture. The way you decode a mid-side capture is by taking the side signal and duplicating it, and then panning one version off to the left and one version off to the right, and then taking a polarity plugin and flipping the phase on one side. So there's our stereo information, right? But another way that we can do it, and the way that I prefer to do it, is to use the Waves S1. So the way I will do this is by creating a stereo aux. I'll assign it to bus 1 and 2, and then assign that to my submix, and then sending them both to this aux. And then I'm placing the S1, there we go, and right where it says input mode, instead of left-right, I'm going to switch it to mid-side. This way, my guitar mid-capture feeds the left side, which becomes the mid, and my side signal feeds the right side, which becomes the side. Now, you might notice something right off the bat. When I do this decoding, the mid capture, or the center of where the guitar is, seems to be panned off slightly to the right. Well, that can happen for a number of reasons. Either the source of the sound literally is to the right of the capture, like we started with our mic configuration slightly off axis from our source, or more commonly, instead of having a 90-degree alignment with our side capture, we're slightly off. So maybe 45 degrees is what's happening here, or maybe a little bit less, maybe like 35 degrees, which is why it feels like it's partially panned to the right a little bit. Now, normally, this would be considered a mistake. As we're going to see, it doesn't always have to be a mistake to tilt your side capture off axis. But let's say that we wanted to correct that, because normally when you do a mid-side capture, like if you're doing it for drum overheads or something like that, you really want it to be where your mid signal is right in the middle, which is usually going to be aimed at your kick and snare. So the way that we're going to do this is we're going to use the Waves In-Phase plugin. All right, and because of the way these auxes work, I need to not send these to an aux. And what I'm going to do is now key the mid capture into the side chain of in phase. Right, so when I play it, I can either play the side capture or the mid capture, or a sum of both. And now I'm going to capture the signal. So it captures the signal, and you can see on the correlation meter that this is about 45 degrees out of phase. So that tells us that perhaps the mic was angled a little bit off, and that's why we're getting this weird tilting when we sum it back into the mid-side decoder. So how do we fix that? Well, we take the side chain and we start moving it forward in time, or really back in time. And we get it so that we're right on that 0 in terms of correlation, because 0 is representative of being 90 degrees off axis. Think about it. If we were completely in phase, that would be like having our mid mic and our side mic pointed exactly the same way. If we're completely out of phase, that would be like having the capsules facing the opposite directions. But if we're 90 degrees, that's perfectly even. It's not completely in phase or completely out of phase. It's exactly 90 degrees out of phase. That's what we want in order to have a mid-balanced mid-side capture. So let's see how that handles being decoded now. Pretty cool, right? We now have the guitar in the middle with the room around it, perfectly balanced, as opposed to how it came in. Where it feels like it's leaning to the right. So that's something that you can keep in mind in case a mid-side capture hasn't been done perfectly. That's a fix. And you might be thinking, well, doesn't the time delay throw things off? It does, maybe a little bit, but it's really no different than, say, the pre-delay on a reverb return, right? It's just a very, very short pre-delay. Now I'm going to set the same thing up for the dobro real quick. All right, looks like we're pretty in phase here, so let's see if we can do the same thing. There we go. Cool. Now let's create our aux. Now, I do want to show you guys something that's kind of cool. Because the acoustic guitar side capture was out of phase, that ends up shifting it to the right. Because the dobro is very in phase, that ends up shifting it to the left. So watch what happens if I take off my phase correction. That keeps things out of the middle. I just got a cool panning scheme going. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up two alternative panning versions for the dobro and the acoustic guitar. The first one is going to be with the signals put in phase, but I'm going to use the rotation on the S1 imager to basically pan things apart. So what the rotation does is it takes the center signal alone, isolates it, and allows you to pan that. Asymmetry does the opposite. It takes the side signal and allows you to pan that. So this is as opposed to normal panning. Now what I'm going to do is bypass the in phase, go to my alternate setting on the S1 imager, and now try and figure out a panning scheme using the natural pan positions that the mid-side decodes into. I mean, if I really wanted to, I could even do the hard panning. And I get this really crazy wide image. So I think I actually like the in-phase version better. When I go out of phase, takes a little bit of correction, I feel like, to kind of get it to really sit right as a stereo field. Otherwise, it kind of sounds a little weird. I think I get a more solid stereo image when I use the version where the mid channel shows up in the mid. So what I can do now is, now that I've got my mid and side figured out, I can start isolating how I want each part to sound and how much side effect do I want, etc. And if I want to do something like, say, affect the top end of just the mid signal, I can always throw on an EQ. Match the brightness there a little bit. And here, so with just a little bit of EQ on the mid signals, I can kind of balance the flavor between the acoustic guitar and the dobro, because I want these to gel together. I want this to be the driving movement of the record. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to color code all of these to be the same thing, because they're all kind of similar. I'm going to create a group aux, label it acoustic and dobro, bus 7 and 8, and I'm going to send both of my signals here. And once I get this sound right, then I'll be able to really build up the entire mix. So what I'm going to do now is flip on my Clariphonic EQ, and I'm going to throw on an insert here. And you can hear a slight textural change just by running through the hardware. Like, I'm not doing any kind of EQ at all at the moment, but just by having it in, it does have a certain effect. Like, it focuses it a little bit more into that core center. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip on the lift and tight mode here on the right to sort of match the acoustic guitar and bring up the fullness of it. I think I'm going to add just a little bit of level from the acoustic guitar as well. And now I'm going to bring up the brightness of the dobro. bring up a little bit of the low end of the dobro. Cool. Now we've got a really big sound with just these two elements, and we can start going from there.